everyone, welcome to another online program presented by Garden City Arts. Today we are painting that pretty painting in the upper corner of your screen, and I'm going to walk you through this step by step. If you purchase the art kit from Garden City Arts, then all you need to do is lay out the colors in the order that you see them here on your foam plate. Make sure you also have a cup of water, you have your chalk handy. You'll need to grab your own paintbrushes. I like to have a 1/2-inch wash brush for this painting, a round brush, and a shader brush. And of course, your canvas. So if you have all of that stuff laid out and ready to go, then we can set our paint to the side and get to drawing. The very first thing that we are going to do is draw out our tree trunk. So the most important part of our tree trunk is that little loop that you see on the original painting, and that's really what we're going to start with. That little covey is where we're going to put all of those beautiful blooming flowers. So I'm going to start on the left hand side of my screen of my canvas of your screen, and I'm going to start by creating a diagonal line and then add a little loop to it, and it's going to go off of the bottom of your canvas. Now, I'm then going to take and make another diagonal line and have that diagonal line lead straight up into the tree trunk. Now, if you feel like that doesn't look quite right, you can do some touch-ups until you're happy with it. For instance, I'm going to just make my tree trunk just a little bit bigger, kind of soften that curve a bit. When you make a mistake, you take a clean, damp brush and you erase the chalk away. At the very end of the painting, you can take a clean, damp paper towel and you can erase away any of the marks that are left over. Okay, we have our basic form. It's okay if it doesn't look like a tree trunk yet. It's not gonna until we start painting it. And then if you want to, you don't have to do this, you can just give yourself kind of some guide of what you're gonna do for the tree bark. I will talk to you in just a moment about this, but you want to add some different lines that are offset. So they don't all look exactly the same. They're not all the exact same size. Maybe some curl around and end where others begin. Now that you have kind of a game plan, we are going to start painting. The very first color that we have on our palette is this kind of grayish brown. It's burnt umber and white mixed together. I'm going to use my biggest brush and I'm going to use it at its thinnest point. So I'm going to turn it at its thinnest point and I'm going to use only the top edge of the brush, not the side of the brush, to do this detail work. I'll show you how to use the side of the brush to kind of blend some areas in a moment. First, I'm going to grab some of this paint. If it's dry, you can always dip your paintbrush in water and mix that water into the paint. You do that kind of on the side of the pile. And then I'm going to create some lines. And again, I want to think about randomness, some really thin, some thicker. I want to think about it being really textured and bumpy. I want to think about some of those lines being short, others being long, some being connected. Maybe create some knots in my tree. A knot kind of is just a football shape with a whole bunch of rings out and going away from it. And once I have some lines, and again, I'm using the top edge of my brush, once I have some lines, then I'm going to show you what I'm going to do next to make it feel even more tree-like. But first, I need a lot more lines. I need some thicker lines and some lighter lines. Now, the more water you mix into your paint, the thinner and more transparent that paint is going to be. The less water, the heavier the paint. You want some heavy lines and some thin transparent lines. And the reason for this is it's going to create more texture and more variety and therefore look more realistic. Okay, so now that we have all of these different lines, we're going to take our brush and we're going to swirl, tap, and dry it. Get all that extra paint out. And then you're going to use the flat edge of your brush to come along and smooth out maybe a few areas. And you can still use all of those curvy lines that you were making, all those curvy marks. Basically what we're doing is we're kind of filling in some of the black, and you can grab a little bit of paint if you don't feel like you have enough, if it's not doing enough. You can take a little bit of paint and do that. And basically what we're doing is that we're covering up more of the black, so it's going to feel more like a tree. And remember, you can always come back in and add some more detail lines. And basically, I'm just building up some texture on my bark until I'm happy with it. Now, if you get to the point where you're just not feeling it at all, take a step back, okay? Go have a beverage break, okay? Come back after your beverage break and look at it again. If you still are not happy with it, well, then replay the video. See if there's something that you missed, okay? Try maybe a different technique. Maybe add less lines or more lines. In the kit, I will include black paint so that if you make a mistake, you can cover it back up, okay? And maybe start again. So there is that out if you absolutely need it. But keep in mind, trees are all different, so it's cool if your tree doesn't look like mine. As long as you're happy with it and as long as it feels like a tree, you're good. And once we put some grass in there, it's gonna feel like a tree. I almost guarantee that it'll feel more like a tree. Okay, now I'm keeping this part pretty dark. You'll notice I didn't go over it a lot because I want some contrast for my flowers, and I'm gonna have some beautiful white, bright flowers there. So I am done with my tree bark now. You'll notice I still have some leftover chalk. That's okay. No stress. You can come back and erase that later after your paint is completely dry. You don't want to try to erase that paint when your you don't want to erase that chalk when your paint is still wet, because then you'll have smears everywhere. So just be patient. Now, we are done with our tree trunk. We're going to move on to our background, and we're going to start putting in some grass. It's very subtle in the background. You might not have even noticed it in the original picture, but there are some indications of grass in the background. As we move forward, there's going to be a lot more grass, and it's going to be warmer in temperature. So this is blue-green grass. This is regular green, and then the very front is going to be yellow-green. So we're changing color temperature to really drive home the fact that this grass is farther away from us than the grass up here. Okay, so I'm going to grab some of that blue-green, and I'm going to be careful not to overdo it. Okay, so I'm going to start right here at my tree trunk, and I'm going to create some really fun little lines of grass. Now, the harder you press, the bigger the grass is going to be, the thicker your line, okay? If you press light, it's going to be thin. If you press hard, it's going to be thicker. So I'm going to create some thicker grass that's right at the tree trunk and going behind it. Try not to get into your tree trunk, but if you do, it's okay. Paint covers paint. You can just put more of this on top of it and cover it up. So I'm going to do that first. I'm going to add quite a bit of paint. I'm being pretty chunky with it, okay? That's a good thing. And then as I come back, I'm going to space out my lines, and they're just going to disappear into the black. So there's a lot more space in between each little blade of grass. And it also kind of gets darker and kind of fades away, and then you won't even notice it's there. Okay, that's how we kind of transition to that background. So I have some grass behind. Now I'm going to move on to some grass in the front. I am going to use a little bit of this blue-green to start putting in a little bit of grass, and we want this grass to overlap our trunk. This grass was behind because it was further away, but this grass is in front. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this blue-green just to get it started. And then I'm going to swirl, tap, and dry my brush before I move on. So swirl, tap, and dry, get all of that green out. And I'm going to move on to my medium green. Okay, this medium green is what I'm going to use for the grass in the front of my tree trunk. And I start at my tree trunk and then I work my way down. Okay, and the reason I do that, I'm kind of avoiding this area because I know I'm going to put flowers there, but the reason I start at the back and work my way forward is so that it looks like I'm layering grass, and it'll hopefully appear the way grass really looks in real life. And I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. Again, kind of leaving that empty area on purpose. We'll come back and do some more to it in a little bit. Okay, now I can take some of this yellow green and put it right on the very end, not anywhere else, the very end of the grass. So basically where the grass is coming off of our canvas. And I'm just going to put that in, get that started, again intentionally leaving a nice opening for my flowers. I can come back in and do more later, but for now I'm happy with it. And until I get those flowers in, I probably won't want to do anything more. All right, so we have tree, we have some grass, and now we need some flowers. And these flowers are very simple, okay? They're straightforward. They're nothing too terribly special, but they're still flowers, and flowers can be difficult to paint and difficult to draw. So I'm going to walk you through really fast how to draw this. Very first thing we're going to do is draw a nice big center, and that is going to be where all of our petals are going to come to, or going to connect. Next, I'm going to draw a few petals coming out and away from the center, and you'll notice that I'm putting some space in between. And the reason for that is I'm going to come back in and put some flowers in between, but you won't see how they connect. They're going to be behind all the other petals. And go all the way around your flower until there's no empty space. Now, I'm going to start with one. I'll put in the second one later, and that's really up to you if you want to put a second one in. I might put mine up a little higher rather than down low like I did with the original. I feel like it needs something right there instead. So, first things first, let's grab our round brush and prime it. We dip it in the paint water and pat it dry. And we're going to grab some yellow paint. It's the next color on our palette. I'm going to have to put on quite a few layers because yellow is the wuss of the color wheel. In fact, I might steal a little bit of white and kind of give it a little bit of a base first and then put some yellow on top. And then I'm going to have to let this dry before I can do another layer. And it's pretty thick paint, so it's going to take a while. So once you have your yellow center, you can swirl, tap, and dry your brush. And we're going to start painting our flower. Now, the petals that are in front that we drew first are going to be the brightest white. The petals in the back are going to be darker. So let me show you what that's going to look like. I'm going to, this petal is in the front, so I'm going to put quite a bit of paint, connect it to my center, and the more water that I have in my brush and mixed into my paint, the more transparent that paint's going to be. Because remember, we talked about this already, more water in paint equals more transparent. So I'm going to just really quickly, and I'm going to kind of ignore my drawing and kind of go off and do my own thing. But I'm going to do heavy, just straight paint with very little water mixed in on a few of these petals that I know are going to be in front. This one's going to be in front. And then I'm going to take water, mix it into my paint, and by watering it down, I am making this very transparent and light. Another trick that I can do is to take a little bit of the color of my tree bark and put that in to distinguish the difference between one petal and the other. I can also use that color to kind of paint in some details and put in some lines so that it's not just a solid white petal. Okay, so now you have the basic idea. You will probably have to do multiple layers. So for instance, I am noticing that as my paint is drying, there's some black popping through my white petal. So I'm gonna have to come back in and do another layer. That's a-okay, no stress. The idea is that the outer edges of your petals are gonna be a little bit brighter than where they connect on the center of your petal. And letting some black show through where it connects is okay. That's going to create contrast, just like we did with the tree trunk, right? We let some black show through and it turned out pretty good. So think about doing lighter on the edges, and then as it comes in towards the middle, that's where it gets a little bit darker. You're gonna do all of the petals, and then we'll do another another flower together up here in just a moment. I'm gonna speed up the video here, and then we'll resume at normal pace in just a moment. Okay, so I have my flower pretty much done. I could probably let this dry, and as it dries, I'm going to notice things that I want to do to make it better. For instance, I'm going to add a lot more white down here, but for the time being, it's okay. So I'm going to move on to put in my second flower, and I'm just going to walk you through this really fast. So once again, we're going to start with that opening, and if you want, you can have some overlap. Overlap is really important to create a realistic picture, because nature is not spaced out, right? There's lots of overlap that occurs in nature. So I'm going to do the center, and then I'm going to put some petals, and I want them kind of going behind. So I'm going to have this petal, or I'm sorry, this flower be pretty dark compared to the one in the front, because it's going to be behind. So I'm not going to add nearly as much white to the petals. So I'm going to, once again, start by adding my center, and I'm just adding kind of a little bit of a white base first, and then putting the yellow back on top. Swirl, tap, and dry your brush, and then to do those petals in the back, because I'm making them darker, you are going to use watered down paint, and you are going to be very careful to not overdo it. So I might do more paint kind of towards the center, and then as it comes towards the back, I'm going to just stop. I'm not going to do a whole bunch. I might even just let it kind of be the background. So I'm doing very light. That is super, super light. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's behind and it doesn't get as much light. So I'm going to do another petal. This one's going to be a little bit brighter. I'm going to use a bit thicker paint with less water mixed into it. And another one that goes behind it. And then once I start getting away from that other flower, that's where I can really start putting in a little bit more paint, brightening it up a little bit more. Not using such thin transparent paint on every single petal. All right, I'm going to speed up the video just a little bit, finish this flower, and then talk to you about how to finish off your painting. Keep in mind that if I'm going too fast, remember, this is a virtual program, so you can pause that video. If I'm going too slow and I am just boring you, fast forward. Push the fast forward button, no stress, skip ahead. So I'll see you in just a little bit. We're going to start again right now. Okay, so I'm going to stop the speed up and just show you. These are not perfect by any means. I'm going to let them dry, and I'll probably do some more layers on them in a little bit, but I wanted to show you kind of how we're going to finish off our flowers. Now we left that big hole, and we need to come in and kind of figure out how to connect it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a little bit more yellow into my green, and I'm going to put some really, really green yellow right in front of the petals, really to indicate that they are the closest thing to us. Then I'm going to take some just regular green, the middle green, and I'm going to connect my flowers to a stem so that we kind of have a good indication of what's going on. And then I can put maybe some more grass and fill that in. So I'm pushing my flowers back by putting some green on top. You don't always have to put the green on top. If you want to put it on top, it's going to push the flowers back more. If you want those flowers to be more prominent, don't put as much green on top of it. So for instance, that right there, if you want the flowers to be more prominent, that would be a mistake. So you would take a clean damp brush and you would erase that green off. And you might take off some paint while you're at it, but that's okay. You can always put it back on and get that green off. Paint covers paint as well, so you'd always paint white back on top, but it is a little bit easier to just erase that paint before you try covering it up with white paint. So there you have it. We're pretty much finished with the painting. Again, I can always go back in and put some more green in, add like maybe a few more green lines need to be added here to make that feel more cohesive and more like a nice grassy stop by a tree. But I leave it to you to decide. You can even put in 3 daisies if you want. If you want to keep on painting and you're enjoying, paint away. So I hope you had a blast and enjoyed yourself, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye.
Thank you for watching this online program. Please help Garden City Arts thank these generous sponsors.